up, guys? I'm about to show you how I made that sound that you just heard. It's found in my Beamer, Benz, or Bentley remix, which you can listen to either on my SoundCloud page or my website. Links will be in the description below. This patch will also be available for download on my website. I'll also include a link to that in the description below. So let's get right into it. This synth is basically a combinator made up of a lot of different Thor polysonic synthesizer. So first thing that we're going to do is right click in our blank rack, and we are going to go to Utilities and Combinator. Once we have the combinator loaded, we're going to go ahead, right click inside of it, choose Utilities, Line Mixer 6.2. The reason why I'm having you guys create a Line Mixer 6.2 is so that the synth can become very, very wide. Essentially, we are going to take one signal, pan it all the way to the left, duplicate the patch, and pan that one all the way to the right. And I'll show you how that's done. Once you have the micro mixer selected, go ahead and right click underneath it, choose Instruments, Thor Polysonic Synthesizer. The very first thing that you want to do once you load your Thor Polysonic Synthesizer is initialize the patch. Go ahead and right click on it and select Reset Device. The very first thing that we are going to change is the range. We're going to go ahead and move that all the way up to 14. Then we're going to come down to polyphony, change the polyphony all the way down to 1. We're going to go down to the release polyphony, and we're going to change that to 1 as well. Under keyboard modes, we want to make sure that we have mono retrig selected. Either you can select that, or you can click on mode until you get to mono retrig. We also want to enable the portamento, also known as glide in other digital audio workstations. Make sure that that is turned on, and we're going to lower that all the way to 11. A quick tip is if you can't get the actual selection just right, hold the shift key down. That will give you a much more precise option. Once we've got those settings enabled, we're going to go ahead and click Show Programmer. The very first thing that we are going to do is make sure that all three of our oscillators are multi-oscillators. To do so, we're going to go ahead and click the little triangle and select multi-oscillator. Do that for all three. Once you have that set, you want to make sure that Thor knows that you want to use all three oscillators. To do so, make sure that you have 1, 2, and 3 all selected. Now that we've got that down, the second and third oscillators, you want to pitch up 1 octave to 5. On the third oscillator, you want to make sure that the tune amount is set to 2. Lastly, you want to make sure that the detune amount for all 3 oscillators is set to a value of 36. Once we've got all that squared away, we want to come up here to the low pass ladder filter, and we're not actually going to use a low pass ladder filter. Instead, we're going to be using a state variable filter. To select that, click the little triangle and choose state variable. Once we do that, we want to make sure that the filter frequency is set to a value of 112. Again, if you're having a hard time getting precise, hold the shift key down. Once you've got that all squared away, we're going to leave the resonance exactly the same. What we are going to do though is we're going to come over here to the filter envelope amount and move that all the way up to 127. Make sure that the velocity is at a value of 81. That's all we're going to do for the state variable filter. Next, we're going to move over to the first LFO. Make sure that you have key sync enabled and tempo sync enabled. The delay should be at a value of 0 or all the way to the left, which it by default should be already. The same with the KBD follow. In my patch, in the sound that you just heard, I actually automated the rate here, and I'll show you how that's done a little bit later. Moving on, we're going to now focus on our amp envelope. The attack should be at a value of 0. Your decay should be at 349 milliseconds. Your sustain should be at a value of negative 54 decibels. And the release should also be at a value of 0. Last but very not least, we are going to enable LFO2, make sure that key sync is enabled and tempo sync is enabled, and leave the rate and delay and the waveform exactly how they are. The very last thing that we want to do before we finalize this synthesizer is make sure that it wobbles a bit. To do so, we are going to move the LFO and make sure that it moves in sync with the filter frequency. Come down here to Source, select LFO1, and choose a destination of Filter 1 frequency. Move the amount all the way up to 100. When you move this filter frequency, you will then hear the wobble. You should now have a sound somewhat like this. Cool. Moving on, the first thing that we're going to do is add a Scream 4 sound destruction unit. To do so, go ahead and right-click on your Thor, select Creative Effects, and select Scream 4 Distortion. Go ahead and leave the damage control exactly where it is at a value of 62. Make sure that you have the overdrive distortion selected. Your parameter 1, you're going to move all the way up to 127. And move your parameter 2 almost all the way down to a value of 8. We're going to enable the cut. So go ahead and click the cut button here. Decrease the low to negative 18. Leave the mid exactly where it is and increase the high to about 7. Go ahead and enable the body by clicking on this little square here. We're going to move the body resonance to about 28. Its scale to about 14. Make sure the auto is set all the way at a value of 0. And make sure the body type is set to E. Last setting that we're going to work with here is the master, which should be at a value of 85, which I believe is its default. Next, what we're going to do is we're actually going to create a BV512 vocoder. Go ahead and right-click on your Thor, select Creative FX, and select BV512 Digital Vocoder. If you were to try and play a note right now, you wouldn't hear any output, and that's because the vocoder is actually in vocoder mode. We don't want that. We actually want to move it up to the equalization mode. Instead of it being on 16 band, we want to make it a 4-band equalization. And all we're going to do is go over to Shift here and move that all the way up to 63. All that does is it gives it a little more crispiness. That's the best way I can describe it. I'm going to go ahead and right-click, and the first thing that I'm going to do is add a compressor. So go to Studio FX, select M-Class Compressor. Essentially what I did here, I lowered the release almost all the way down to 0. The attack, I would say 16 milliseconds. The ratio we're going to move almost all the way to the left, just underneath the 2:1 ratio. And the threshold we're going to move almost all the way to the left as well, about negative 29.8 decibels. The input gain, we're going to make it a 45-degree angle, I'd say about 3.4 decibels. And that's all you're going to do for the compressor. Next, I'm going to go ahead and create my maximizer. So go ahead and hit Studio FX, Maximizer. Make sure that you have the 4 millisecond look ahead enabled. You're going to turn the input gain up just a tad, I'd say to 2.2 decibels. Make sure that you have the auto release selected. Output gain up just a tad, I'd say to 1.1 decibels. Enable your soft clip and leave the amount at 64. Now for the most personal preference, equalization. Go ahead and right-click on your Thor, select Studio Effects, select M-Class Equalizer. All I did was I enabled a low cut, I enabled the high shelf, and I just added the gain up just a titch. And that's it for the synth itself. You should hear something along the lines of this. In order to make it wider, all you do, select the Thor, hold the Shift button and select Scream. Right-click on your devices, select Copy Devices and Tracks. Deselect everything you just selected by clicking underneath the Scream 4. Right-click and say Paste Devices and Tracks. You should have duplicate of everything that you just saw. Once you have your devices duplicated, go ahead and hit the Tab key. It's going to look a little bit intimidating, no doubt, but bear with me. All you really have to do is take the output from your Scream 4 sound destruction unit and put it into the audio input of the second micro mixer. Depending upon how you added your creative effects, your audio output might also be on the compressor. Go ahead and hit the Tab key. Now you should see up here, Scream 1 and Scream 1 copy. That means that you did it correctly. It could also say mcomp1 and mcomp1 copy. Put the channel 1 pan all the way to the left at a value of 64 and the channel 2 pan at all the way to the right at a value of 63. Now when you play it, you should have a much wider sound. You might have to tweak the levels just a bit so you don't get any insane clipping, but you get the picture. To automate the rate, what you want to do is click on Show Programmer up here at the top. What the programmer does is it takes any knobs from your internal instruments within the combinator and routes them to any of the rotary knobs or the buttons that you have up top here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to automate the LFO1 rate of the left channel to rotary 1 and the LFO1 rate of the right channel to rotary 2. To do that, I'm going to select Thor 1, rotary 1 target, LFO, LFO1 rate. Do that same process for Thor 1 copy. Instead of rotary 1, you want to make sure that it's targeted to rotary 2. Now when you move these knobs, it should move the rate of the LFO of each synthesizer. You can get some really cool effects with that. And that's about it for the synthesizer. Go ahead and add reverb, delay, tweak the settings to your heart's content, and enjoy the sound.